Hey guys, okay, so this is what we're going to be using as our base page. This is called a tube, and for the base page, and let's see, we are looking at in centimeters. Wait a minute, let me write this down now. So 19 centimeters by, and let's see, we are at 20, okay, let me write this one down, 20.8. So it's 7.5 by 8 1/8, or that. Now the other side of the page, because there's two pages, now this one is going to be the 19 centimeters, so that's still the 7.5, but we need an inch extra, so we're at 9 1/8 inches. And let me give you the centimeters on that. We are at, I'm not so good at these centimeters, so it does take me a few moments. I don't want to give you a wrong number and not have it work right. Okay, where's my, there it is. There it is. Okay, so it's 19 by 23.1 centimeters. And yeah, I'll just write that down. And so I am doing a voiceover because this, I didn't press the button to record. So half of the stuff that I am telling you right now, I don't remember what it was. But you're going to get the basics. I mean, you're going to get the important stuff. But that is what we're going to use to attach to the album. So the longest piece, that is 9.5 by 7.5. So you're going to have, you need 5 of each size. And on the 7.5 side, I'm sorry, on the 9-inch side, you're going to score a 1/2 inch. Fold it over. Do a nice burnish. Yeah. There we go. And okay, so I know that I'm using the gray part of this paper, but it still works out the same. My leftovers might be a little bit bigger than yours, but I just, since I have it, I'm using it. And I'm sorry, I don't know what else I'm telling you about, other than the base pages I am making out of the heavier 85-pound weight paper. And I usually use the flips and the flaps for the 80-pound paper. And then if I'm going to do any matting with black, then I try and use the 65-pound because it adds less bulk and weight, because your books can get pretty heavy. So we're going to go ahead and line up the first side. And take your time, make sure it equals both the sides and the top and the bottom. And tapping it does help, putting it so that it goes all the way down to the bottom even. There you go. And, burnish it, squeeze it with your fingers, however, but you do want to make sure that you are nice and straight, or it will throw everything off as you're trying. No hooch. No. Sorry, I've got my puppy. And a little bit of glue. Hooch! No. Okay, so now that we've got that done, you always want to open it up and make sure that you've got that. Sorry, guys. Okay, so now that we've got that closed up, now we can get a perfect place to score. So I'm going to make a mark that is resting against your top shorter piece. And that is where you're going to want to make your mark, is where it's right up against the black paper, the shorter one. That mark is where you're going to score. So you're going to put it in your scoreboard. You're going to make sure that you have at least it down along the bottom. It might not line up to push it all the way over to the side, but you do want to make sure that you at least have your paper resting against the bottom ledge, and then just carefully make your score line. Now this is very thick paper, this 85, so you know, you see me kind of sawing at it a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to, and because the score, the way I scored it, you always want to, when you score, you make a valley and a mountain. The valley is the part that your score tool is making, pushing it down into the groove, and then on the opposite side, oh great, on the opposite side is the mountain. So you always want to fold so you're making your mountain into a valley and the valley into a mountain. So I hope that makes sense. So that's why I flipped it over and rescored. So sorry. Get rid of my pencil mark. And this way, when you fold it over and lay it down, you should have a pretty spot on edge where your blacks are going to line up. And get your glue. Now you can use score tape here if you want, but you know, usually the glue does just fine. And then just lay it over, lay it down. You want to make sure you got it nice and straight. Hooch, honey. I'm sorry, guys. I'm babysitting. My husband's in bed. But yeah, you just want to make sure that you're getting a nice square piece to start off with. I mean, not necessarily square like 8 by 8, but just that the edges all match up and it's nice and straight. So when you do put your papers on it, that they're gonna lay right, and that the page is gonna lay right in the book. So this is kind of the first main thing that you have got to build as close to perfect as you can. And so you want to make sure that everything lines up and it's nice and straight. That's about it. And so you need 5 of these. So you go ahead and you can pre-cut all of them because you're doing the second score by itself. So that's about it. Just get 5 of those done, and then we will be back and start on our first one. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and I hope everybody is having a wonderful day. And of course you're having a wonderful day if you're sitting here being able to watch YouTube, and hopefully you're sitting in your craft area and you're gonna join me. Come on, let's get going. Okay, so we have, remember, 5 of these. These are our tubes, or they are called base pages. Okay, so we have 5 base pages. Now, I don't like working on my base page, so I am going to take a piece of black paper and I am going to get it lined up, and I want to make this just, I mean, a sliver, not even something that's going to measure on the on your ruler. Okay, just, I mean, I'm just talking a tiny bit. So I'm going to make a mark. Let me actually make it with my white. See if I can do this, since I don't have a point on here. Okay. See if it'll focus on that. Can you see how much black is just beyond the white mark right here? Let me get a piece of light colored something. Do you see the white mark on there? That's how much smaller I want you to make that. I mean, that's just like 1/32, because I got it really close up to the camera. Okay, so I mean, it's just like a pencil line thickness smaller, and it's just so that it's easy to put on and you're not trying to line it all up, but it's not going to make the edges build up too much, because you're just off the edge just a smidge. Okay, so we're going to cut this. Now, once we get our first cut correct, and remember to save all your pieces. So once we get our first cut correct, now once I cut it, I'm going to come back and I'm going to make sure that I'm all right, and I am. Good. Okay, and then we're going to measure this way. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just come off the edge a little bit and cut that. Alrighty. And now listen, guys. You might say, oh, I'm not going to save this little piece. That's useless. Well, yes, it can be useless. But if we get to a point where you're running out of black paper, sometimes these little buddies will save your butt. Okay. Because I don't live near a craft store, and I have had to do several projects where I've run out of the base color that I was using of cardstock, and so I had to use those little pieces. So they do come in handy. So once you've got one of these, remember that if your paper cutter can handle it, you can do 2 or 3 at a time. You know, whatever your paper cutter can handle without it, you know, ripping through it. One thing on your paper cutter is, if you haven't changed your blade for a while, if it is leaving little marks, little pits, or I can't think of what I'm trying to, but little round balls, or not cutting it just like clean cut, it's time for a new blade. And you're going to be so much happier with the cuts you get once you change and put a new blade in. Okay, so you save those old blades though, because you can use those old blades on thicker paper, lightweight and medium weight chipboard. So instead of using your new blade on your chipboard pieces, you used an old blade on them, and that way we'll be able to cut our chipboard, because it'll cut through chipboard really well. It just won't do really well cutting through the thinner papers and cardstock. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and give you some measurements, and I think I have them written out. And it, I'm sorry, my hand. It's actually a 7 3/8, and then the next 1/8 makes it 7 1/2. So if you actually go in between the 7 3/8 and 7 1/2, you'll get it. But 7 3/8 will totally work. So 7 3/8 by 8 1/16. That's inches. 18.8 by 20.4 centimeters. Okay, and that will give you a nice size if you don't want to do the marks. I prefer to do the marks, but I will give you, when we're building the base page, I will give you measurements if you want to do it that way. I find, because we're not perfect people, when I do 10 of these, 9 of them might be spot on, but that 10th one that I go to put on something is not going to fit right. It's going to be a little too small or a little too big. A little too big is great, because you can cut that down. But remember, you know, we're not perfect, so stuff happens. But I think we can go ahead and cut out our 10, so we have them, and we know we're going to do 12 pages, but we're only going to do 10, one on this side and one on this side, and we have 5 base pages, so that's 10 mats. This is a mat. This is what's called a mat, but it's really kind of our cheat sheet, because we get to take this and leave our base page, so we're not working on it. It's fine when it's not got anything on the back, but if I do a bunch of pockets and flips and flaps and stuff on this side and then flip it over and try and work, it's going to be all uneven, and you're not going to enjoy working on it on the surface. This way we can make our page, and then later on we can figure out where we want what. Because remember, we're going to do 2 at the same. So we're going to want one of that same kind in the front of the book and one of that same kind in the back of the book. Or when we open a page, are we going to want both those pages exactly the same, kind of mirror images of each other? So we'll get to play around with what we're going to do. So go ahead and cut the 10. I'm going to cut my 10, and I'm going to do my first page. Then with the first page, you will see what it is that we're going to be doing, and then you will see you and I will work the second page ourselves together, and you will see how it goes, we made that first one. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. But so I'm going to go ahead and get my stuff cut, and I'll be back in a minute. All right, guys. Okay, so the first page style that we're going to make 2 of is this one right here. And it took one whole 8.5 by 11 sheet and 3.5 inches off of another 8.5 by 11 sheet. So we have a flap up, and we may shorten this later on, but for right now I'm leaving it just like it is. So we have a flap up, we have 2 flaps open, and we have a nice pocket all the way across here. So super simple, but yet with this flap down here, and we're going to decorate that when we get to that point, it is going to be stunning, okay? But it's just simple, and I'm going to show you right now. Okay, so where did I put my next one? Here we go. I want to make sure that I have my top, so just make sure it lines up, because they're not terribly, you know, we're working on basically squares, so make sure, even if you want to put a little T over here so that you remember. Okay, so we're going to get out a page of our cardstock. Oops. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our cardstock and we're going to line it up. Let's do it this way. We're going to line it up with one of the edges, because we want to make it the same length. All right, so I have this edge here lined up perfectly, and this edge here, well, it was lined up perfectly. So let's make sure. There we go. Okay, so I am going to make a mark. I'm going to put my pencil right against, let me put this. I have, let me see. There we go. Okay, so I have this page right here pulled away from the edge. That's how much I need to cut off. So this page, I'm laying it down flat and I'm running my pencil right along that page and marking on the bottom page that I need to cut. Okay? So we are going to take this page. Now when I cut on this mark, you got to know if you want to cut directly through the center of the mark, and that's when you have something that you're you know, dead on. I don't know. Let me explain this to you just one way, and then we'll get to the other ones later. So I have this mark. My paper is actually the length up to that mark, not part of the mark, just up to that mark. So when I put it on my cutter, I'm going to cut right on the edge of that line. I'm not going to cut the line. I'm going to cut it off of this piece of paper that we're going to use. So you're going to cut this entire mark off, but right at the edge of it. Hopefully that makes sense to you. There's other ways of sticking it in your cutter. Big thing is just knowing your cutter and how it works. And I don't know if you can see that, but my pencil mark is completely on this piece I just cut off, which I'm going to save. Okay, so now let's double check. Always want to check your finished product to make sure you're doing a-okay. And if there's ever, oh, let me pull you back out. If there's ever a time that it hangs over a little bit, well, remember, none of us are perfect. So I have just a little teeny spot right here. I'm just going to hold, now I have this lined up and I have this lined up, and I'm just going to cut off that little bit. There. Now we're perfect. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put a score mark. Where did I put my... Hello? Oh, it's slid underneath. There we go. Okay, so we're going to put a 1/2 inch score mark on this side. And I'm going to cut this off so that I'm not confusing you, because most of you guys are not going to have that on your paper. So I'm just going to cut it off. So now we have this mark on this side, and we're going to go ahead and make a mark on the opposite side. So I have a mark here. Now I flipped it around, and we're going to make a mark here. Now remember, you want to have it up against your edge and the little lip on both the top and the side, and then make your score line. If you want to go through it twice, I have pretty heavy paper, the 65 pound, start soft. You can always add more pressure. Don't dig into it, because you'll tear your paper. Okay, so start soft, even if you have to go over it 2 or 3 times. Okay, until you get the feel for what your paper can take and the type of mark you want to make it. So I folded it over, and you want to make sure that the edges are lining up against the edge of the paper, so that you're not getting it folded crooked. Because even though you score it, it can still fold not just perfect. And of course, perfect is unattainable, but we like to make it as nice as we can, because we want people to go, ooh, ah. We don't want them to go, oh my God, that doesn't match. And you know what? If they say that, just like, go away. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Okay, so now we have our flaps, our hinges on both sides of this. We're going to set this side just for a second. Now, I want you to get your ruler out. Now, if you do have a Tim Holtz ruler, this is going to be a lot easier, because we're going to find the center. From this end to this end, we're going to find our center. So, first I eyeball it. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4. So then we're going to find where it matches up. Okay, so this is my center, and I'm going to make a mark. And I'm going to make a mark on this side too, because I have it there. Now, I can tell you that it is 3. Gosh, I've been trying to keep these fairly simple for you. Just make your mark, okay? Find your center. If you have to do it this way, if you just have a regular ruler, then just do it at, your finger is basically, without pushing it down, is basically a 1/2 inch. And so try and find your 1/2 inches by doing that. And then keep coming in, and keep coming in, and keep coming in, and keep coming in, and there we go. So then there's your center mark. All right, whatever way you can get into it. That's how I used to do it until I got my centering ruler. Makes it really, 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 really nice. Another way of doing it is folding it over, matching it up, and making a little pinch mark. And then you can kind of figure out, you know, your center from there. Anyway, so now what we're going to do is, using our mark, is I'm going to line up. I've got the hinge in my hand. It's going along this side, and this is my top. There's the T right there. So I'm going to line it up, line my top sheet with my hinges on the bottom, line it up with the edge of our mat page. Now I have my mark here. I'm going to make a mark on this top sheet that I'm going to cut, and I'm going to make it to the right, just ever so slightly to the right of the center line. So let me show you that. Can you see how it's just kind of running down along the side of it and not right on it? Okay? And then when you cut with your cutter, you're going to want to cut right through the center of that line this time. Okay, you don't want to go off to the left or off to the right. You want to cut right through the center. So you're going to set that up where that's where you're going to cut as close as you can get. This is no pressure. I'm just trying to teach you some different ways of working with your cutter, because learning how your cutter works is takes a huge amount of mistakes off the plate, you know, because you'll make your mark, and then instead of cutting it right down the center, you'll cut it to the left. Well, now it's too long, so you have to go back and trim it off a little bit. Or if you cut it to the right of the mark, now it's too short, and you're not going to be able to do what you really wanted to do, if it's that important. Okay? And now on this, you got your corner here with your hinge, and your corner here. My top is at the top, and I am going to pick a corner, line the two corners up, and then line, so it's like a pivot point. Put your finger down on it once you've got it on there. Then you line the bottom up, and then you should, let's see, I think it slid. It did. Okay. Line the bottom all the way across, and then it should drop and go right up the paper perfectly. Wonderful. So that is really good. I'll show you that again. So now pull your paper back, and we've cut the one side off. Now we have this hinge, and we're going to line it up on this side. I still have my mark. I can see it even with this closed because I cut it just to the right of it. So now this one we're going to cut just to the left of it. So I'm lining it up. Take your time. And I didn't put it down on my mark. There we go. line it up, you making sure that it's on your mark. Okay, so I've got my mark. I'm going to mark it now this time to the left of my mark, and I'm going to cut right up the center of that mark I just made on this one. Okay, and then double check it. Always want to double check, because that will be, you know, on some of the parts, it'll be the last time you actually get to fix it. It's perfect. Now, when you have flips and flaps, you want to make sure you put enough glue so that your pages are going to adhere well. See, can you see me here? Maybe this will work a little better. So I'm going to put my corner down. I'm going to put my bottom along the edge of the bottom of the matte sheet, and then I'm just going to drop this and put it down. Now, if there's a little bit of something, then you have a little bit of wiggle to get it just right. And there we go. There we go. So there's our two flaps. Isn't it lovely? And see, that was super, super easy, especially with the not measuring part. So this is what I am really wanting you to learn, is the not measuring part, because I think you actually get a closer, better cut by doing the marks. Okay, now this piece we're going to, this is the piece that's left over after you cut these two pieces. Okay, after we cut these and put them on, this is the piece I have left. I'm going to put it on my scoreboard, make a score mark, fold it over and burnish. I'm going to find my center by eyeballing. Okay. Let's see. Get it over a little bit. Come on. So when I think I've found my center, if you're not very good at finding your center, or don't have that very special eye that some people have, like my husband, then I take my ruler and I just see if I'm exactly the same on both sides. And I pretty much am. Yep. So I want to make sure I've got it pushed all the way down, so it's against the paper as far as I can get it. Pick it up, flip it over, open it up. Make sure it looks even across there and doesn't look crooked, that maybe you just didn't have it. All right, and then we're just going to glue this down on the back. Okay, so far we have no waste. And again, this will cut off. Now, mine, the first one, I didn't cut off that little, I didn't cut this off. So this one is a little bit bigger than this one, and I'm sorry, I did not think of that. So I am going to have one of these that's a little bigger than yours. So, but that's okay. It'll be okay. We'll figure it out. Okay. So, oh, we had a little bit of glue. Squeeze out. Okay, so now we've got it opened up, and I'm going to use the same sheet that I already cut some off of. This is was a whole 8.5 by 11, so this is 8.5 inches. I want a 3.5 inch pocket here. So on the 11 side, you're going to put the 11 side where your cutter is going to cut this way. Your 11 side is going to be down here. And you're going to cut 3.5 inches off of this, of your 8.5 by 11 sheet. Okay, so 3.5. And we didn't really have scraps yet for that, so I went ahead and we just did it this way. Okay, so now we're going back to our scoreboard, and we're going to make a 1/2 inch hinge. Again, making sure that you're against the lips. Fold it over. Make sure that you lining it up on both sides correctly. Get my little ruler back home here. All right. Boop, 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 boop. Now, we have, let me bring this up to you. We have this hinge right here, and that's where our flap closes up, okay? We do not want to put this hinge all the way into that corner, because then they're going to be fighting for space. Because then you're going to put paper on both sides of this, paper on this side, and it's going to be fighting for space. So when you place these down, I'm going to put a piece. Now I'm putting this right into the score mark. So that's right on the score mark. So this way you'll be able to see. Let me get it straight, for heaven's sakes. Just hook this in here. Okay. All right, so that's right at the score mark. I'm trying to get it so you'll be able to see the score mark. So you can see the score mark. It's kind of that shiny little beveled edge right there. Okay. When I put this on, I want to make sure I'm away from that score mark. Can you see that purple paper? I want to make sure I'm away from my score mark about that much. Okay. So it's like a 1/16 of an inch, not quite an 1/8. So now we're going to place, we're going to not run it along the edge here. We're just going to lift it up just a little bit so that we can actually see where the fold line is on this page. Okay, our fold line here. So I'm placing the pocket approximately what I showed you, and which is about a 1/16 of an inch away from this score line. I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to make a mark on the pocket at about a 1/16 of an inch away from this score line. Okay, so this score line, we want to stay the same amount away. So then we're going to come back to our scoreboard, and if you have to move your mark, let me make this in white so you can see. Okay, hopefully, yeah, you can see that. If you have to move the mark in order to get it into centered on a groove, so that your bone folder has a way to make the score line exactly where you want it. And that's not exactly where I want it, so I'm moving it over just a smidge more. Okay. And then you just make a nice score mark. And hopefully you guys went and watched my scoring video, which will help you on your scoring. Okay, so here we go with this. Scored that, and I'm going to take my eraser and erase that white mark because it is going to show on the outside. There we go. Okay, so The only other thing now, I'm huge on, okay, so we have this flap and the hinge right here, okay? Now I'm fixing to put another hinge on top of this hinge, which means I'm going to have 1, 2, okay, so the actual front of the pocket, the hinge off of this flap, and my back piece of paper. So that's 4 sheets of paper without putting any designer paper on it yet. That's 4 sheets of paper layered up right here. So when I look at my papers, I don't want to see that big buildup. So one thing that helps kind of hide that buildup a little bit is taking, I have my scissor underneath the flap at a little bit of an angle going towards the tip, the corner fold of the paper. And I'm just going to cut a little edge and get my purple paper back. So I just cut a little edge. So now it's at an angle, and there you can see where the regular paper is. It just is going to allow this bottom paper to glue down without everybody having to see this added piece. And I do that on the top and the bottom. You don't have to take off much, just a little bit. Okay, just little triangles, little funky looking triangles. Okay, and then we're going to glue it down because we've already checked and it fits in there very nicely. So we're going to, and at this point it doesn't matter which one's the top and which one's the bottom because it's exactly the same. Sometimes it will make a difference depending on if you're doing something on the pocket. There's that one. And yes, this flap here is a little bigger than a 1/2 inch. It's just a little bigger, so it's not that big a deal. Now, in order to actually have it be a pocket, you need to glue down the bottom too. Sometimes we all forget to glue down our bottoms, and it's not that big a deal. So again, I'm going to use the same kind of method. I'm going to line it up. I'm going to make sure I stay away. And then I'm hoping that this will drop down and line up perfectly with the bottom and be far enough away on this side. And I probably need to scoot this back just a smidge. Ah, there's much better. Up, down a little bit. You have a few seconds, so don't get panicky to move your stuff around. And then we want to burnish because we want that glue to spread and get everywhere. If you have little bits of glue coming out, you can run your fingernail down it. You can run your bone folder if if that's what you need, if you don't have fingernails. Sometimes I even will take my tweezers and run down, whatever you have. If you don't have fingernails or you don't want to mess up your fingernails. There's no messing these up. I've been gardening. So there is our first page, guys. And again, we may cut this down, make it shorter. I don't know. But there's our first flap, our 2 flap, and our pocket. Yahoo! Okay, guys. That's it for the first one. Let's go to the next one. So join me. Stay with me now, because this is going to be good.